His Excellency President Donald Ramotar has announced that Guyanese will go to the polls early in 2015 following the refusal by the opposition to use the period of prorogation for meaningful engagements with the government on issues of national interest. This means that the constitutional time frame for the holding of general elections would be contracted. What's the real intention of the opposition in refusing to discuss issues which would impact positively on the welfare of Guyanese? How significant is the President's action in preserving the life of the 10th Parliament? What can Guyanese expect over the next few weeks or months? With me to answer these and other related questions in this edition of Political Scope, our Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Anil Nandlall, and Minister of Labour, the Honorable Dr. Nanda Gopaul. Ministers, welcome very much. Let me start with you, Attorney General. First of all, is this in any way a sense of déjà vu following what the opposition engineered in 1997?
Thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. I predicted that the opposition would have rejected the President's offer to dialogue. And the opposition's conduct must be viewed in a particular historical context. You would recall that whenever the opportunity presents itself and whenever it is convenient for them to do so, members of the opposition from both political parties have taken the high moral position that dialogue is important, that consensus building is important, that speaking together, working together are all important concepts, important to nation building, important to our democratic ethos, etc. And every time the government presents them with an opportunity to come to the table to dialogue, they either refuse to do so, or if they come to dialogue, they bring with them unreasonable demands which cause a breakdown of the dialogue. I can cite the budget talks every year that the Minister of Finance would normally invite members of the APNU as well as the AFC to, and either they are out of the country or whenever they come, they present to the Minister unreasonable proposals, knowing full well that those proposals can be accepted. Then they go and they say that the dialogue has broken down. I can also cite the negotiations we have had in relation to the electricity situation in Linden.
But if I may interject respectfully, we'll come to the details of the dialogue. In terms of what happened in 1997 when the PPP government was forced to give up 2 years of its term, based on the President's announcement, if we have elections early in 2015, clearly there'll be at least more than a year that will be curtailed from the current constitutional term. Is this a sense of déjà vu in some way?
Well, yes, in the sense that you have one set of players, again, denying the democratic will of the Guyanese people. The Guyanese would have gone to the elections and they would have voted en bloc for the PPP. And when the election results would have been tabulated, the PPP would have received the largest number of votes, causing it to form the government. Constitutionally, a government is to last for 5 years. That is the expectation of the Guyanese people when they cast that ballot, as was the expectation in 1997. On both occasions, you found that a process has been initiated emanating from the opposition, which has resulted in the rejection of the franchise, the will of the Guyanese people. Because on both occasions, the life of the government was curtailed. Almost 2 years is going to be lost again from this government in terms of its 5-year term of office. And therefore, one has to take that into account because you're hearing that the prorogation was an undemocratic act.
But that was my next question.
Right.
In that context of the opposition saying it was undemocratic, a dictatorship, here you have the possibility, well, the strong possibility now that at least, well, as you said, almost 2 years will be curtailed.
The irony of the thing is that they wanted to bring down the government on November the 10th.
Is that the real intention of the opposition, Dr. Gopaul?
Well, it couldn't be anything other than creating a state of uncertainty in the country and moving the Guyanese people to immediate elections, which would have taken the country into campaign mode during this period. Had they succeeded, it means government business would have halted. People would have had no good Christmas because you know what happens during the period of it, the tenseness, the type of mudslinging and the type of attacks which take place on innocent people, orchestrated by, very often, members of the opposition. And I believe that if the PNC or the APNU and the AFC were serious about all their talks about shared governance, national front governance, and that inclusive governance and all these things, these actions surely will not give one the impression that they are serious. You cannot win a consensus. You cannot build a national government based on intimidation, threats, and coercion. You can only build a cohesive people and a cohesive movement or a cohesive government through dialogue, through sensible proposals, and through intelligence. What we have found was unreasonableness since the APNU and AFC combined got the one-seat majority. It's sheer unreasonableness when you look into the parliament. No, nothing of reason prevail. They have gone on a wild crusade.
All right, if I may come back to the Christmas season here, Attorney General, this is the biggest time of the year for people across the world. We know there's an old adage, there's no Christmas like a Guyanese Christmas. If Parliament had met on November 10th, more than likely there would have been the moving of the no confidence motion, and possible with the conclusion of that. By doing that at that time, and by accusing, by calling for elections now, maybe or asking for a date around this time, is the opposition showing in any way some kind of disregard to the sentiments of the celebration of this festive season?
The opposition cares less, in my view, about what is important to the people of Guyana. I mean, every one of their actions, if one is to analyze them, the rejection of Amila Falls, the rejection of the airport, the cutting of the national budget, all these things are demonstration of their disregard for what is important to the welfare of our country and our people. So, having a political campaign in the middle of the Christmas season would have been the least of their concern, because they were gunning to move a no confidence motion, according to them, within the first hour of the parliamentary sitting of November the 10th. That would have catapulted Parliament into a dissolution, and elections would have followed suit within 3 months. Right now, we would have been campaigning. So I agree with you that the decision was insensitive and did not take into account what the people of Guyana want. They never, in my view, act in the interest of the people anyway.
And their fulminations, no doubt, are as a result of them being caught with their pants down, if I may use the term, because they ought to know. And I think they have about 5 or 6 lawyers on their side, the opposition combined. They ought to know that there were options available to the president. They ought to understand these options and what it can result. But they were gung-ho that their no confidence would be the way to go, and that the government would sit down and accept what they were doing. Having been outflanked, they're upset and they make all sort of intemperate statements, threatening statements. And I was particularly saddened when you hear of some of the dialogue and the exchanges at the last AFC conference last Saturday, that is. You cannot want to talk about building political consensus and behave in that manner.
There was a comment that was made, and reportedly, Mr. Ramjattan said that, among other things, that they will fry people. I think many Guyanese would interpret that differently, unfortunately. How do you view that particular statement in the context of what you're talking about, Dr. Gopaul, with them touting a National Front government?
Well, they could be. The statements are easy to be made, and political grandstanding is another story. They can mount corruption, they can mount all sort of things, but nothing can be established against this PPP administration. Nothing has ever been established against the PPP to point to the fact that there was one iota of corrupt practice by any member of the cabinet at any point in time during the 20-odd years of the PPP. They can't. The Integrity Act is there, where people file their returns, and the PPP have complied. They have not complied, many of them in the opposition. There is a national budget, there is spending, expenditure, and an audit statement every year presented for the first time in this country. Every year you get an audit statement, and that is being scrutinized by the opposition. If there was one iota of corruption in those statements or coming out as a result of those audits, they would have been the first to jump because they show how badly they want this government. So it's easy to talk about corruption. Hard to establish. It isn't around. There might be corruption at other levels of government, but corruption is not being practiced by the PPP civic administration. And whenever we see corruption and we act on them, we have the most difficult time in prosecuting people. The laws and the whole process of natural justice sometimes make it difficult to prosecute.
All right, if I can come back to some sentiments that are expressed, and in general terms, I alluded to the fry them comment, but Attorney General, I'm sure you're aware of some of the unfortunate racism that unfolds among the political outpourings of some in the opposition. As Attorney General, how do you view these?
Well, I have observed in the many public utterances that are emanating from both political parties, latent and patent racism and racist rhetoric. And it's a campaign that is going to unfold in the political arena as elections come close. That will be one that seems to be predicated upon racism. You have the AFC declaring openly that they're going to target a particular ethnic group. Ramjattan said, for example, in one of his outpourings, that he will destroy the PPP support base. You know, since 2011, in their political campaign, they target ethnic communities, and that is why they concentrated in certain areas. And another example of, is there an accusation, actually, of racism against the PPP in Berbice? Because when we speak about their alliance with APNU, which is a fact, I mean, we don't have to fabricate any stories to that effect. They campaigned strategically in that way in the 2011 elections. There are so many instances in the parliament where the allied forces, the cutting of the budget, rejection of Amila Falls, and all the no confidence motion itself showed the two parties coming together. And when we draw that to people's attention, they accuse us of racism. But they are not even, the rapacious way by which they do things. For example, Mr. Nagamootoo and Mr. Ramjattan refused to mount the APNU platform at the square of the revolution, but send instead Mr. Nigel Hughes and Mr. Patterson. Now, there is inherent racism in that. And you know, they go back to certain constituencies and they preach the same type of things. And, you know, they accuse the government, for example, they go to the sugar workers and they tell the sugar workers that, you know, the government is giving Linden free electricity, but sugar workers are not going to be paid increase in salaries. When the sugar workers are paid increase in salaries now, they go back to the bauxite workers and they said they are only paying sugar workers increased salaries. They're not paying you increased salaries. There is a racism that is inherent and innate in this type of political strategy.
But how can we guard against these kinds of developments?
But I am hoping that our people are educated. I know that they are educated, and they will see beyond the pale of these racist platforms and screens that are being erected by these political parties. I see another former member or a member of the PNC saying in the newspapers today that the AFC should concentrate on breaking the back of the PPP in its particular ethnic constituency. So there is targets that are based upon ethnicity and race. And that, I believe, is quite unfortunate. And the very people who are doing these things are the persons turning around and accusing the PPP and the government of racism. And I've outlined to you facts. These are things that are not disputed. You go and you look at their public statements. This is exactly what they say. Go and look at their actions. This is exactly what they have done.
So is this a call in some way for Guyanese to reject these kinds of outpourings?
I am saying we have to go to election. Guyanese political leaders, having regard to our history with ethnic insecurities being a factor to which we cannot turn a blind eye, politicians, leaders of our country, should be embarking upon initiatives and should be putting ideas out there that will seek to heal those problems, not exacerbate them. And what you have here are political leaders that are exacerbating those wounds, historical wounds in our population.
Yeah, and I take it a stage further. The PPP administration has developed Guyana in an even-handed way, has given opportunities to everyone, whether it's scholarships, developmental funds, whether it is development in communities, and that's the point the AG was making just now, that attacks have come when these politicians go into the PPP stronghold, where PPP supporters are based. They say, look, the PPP is neglecting you and giving Linden, for example, or giving a PNC stronghold certain things. That is racism. That is fuel racism. If they are serious about nation building, I dare them, I challenge them, join in an alliance with APNU as they have forged an alliance in Parliament and go to the elections. But the statement which came out that the AG is talking about from a former or a PNC member, that AFC should target the Indian areas, that's the reality they recognize, and they are saying, were we to join with the APNU, we are likely to lose Indian votes. Straight, they're making that clear. That is racism.
And that is precisely why those two fellas, Mr. Ramjattan and Mr. Nagamootoo, who feel that they are so bright, did not mount the platform.
So this is not about issues then? Is that what you're saying? It's not necessarily about issues?
Not about issue. I am saying to you, political leaders should go and point to the people merits and ask them to vote on merits, not on race. We have a track record that we are prepared to defend. A track record that showed that this country has moved from a state of bankruptcy to economic viability, if not prosperity. 8 years of consecutive economic growth, a stable dollar, reducing interest, increasing salaries and social benefits for people annually. That is our track record, with a array of infrastructural developments right across this country in every single sector. Over 100,000 house lots, water, roads, medical facilities, all of that. I mean, I don't want to detain you unnecessarily with outlining, but that is what we are campaigning on.
Right.
And we expect people to vote for the PPP on merit.
If I may come back to the president.
And
Sorry.
human resource development is another area, never in the history before. Is Guyana fortunate to graduate over 250 doctors one time? Last year, in excess of 250 doctors. And when you look at that with the improvement of our healthcare, all the facilities that we have throughout the country, the knocking down of the specialty hospital, the voting down of that, the monies, show how bankrupt people could be, how vindictive they could be against an administration. I'm not talking about
You mean bankrupt in mentality?
mentality.
Okay.
I'm not talking about what they did to the hydroelectricity and so on, but a specialty hospital touched people, just like that. All those other projects which they knocked down show clearly that they are not patriotic.
I want to come back to the president's announcement. In a nutshell, what does the president's announcement really mean? What does it mean?
It means that there will not be a resumption of Parliament for the resumption of the 10th Parliament. It means that Parliament will be dissolved. It means that we will go to an elections shortly. Everything else has failed. Importantly, we have begun a 7th cycle of continuous registration, and one of the objectives that the President had highlighted he wanted to achieve by prorogation was to offer an opportunity to enfranchise as many people as possible, because we want as many people as possible qualified to vote to be put on the list so that they are able to exercise their franchise. And a delay of elections allowed this, a delay of rather the dissolution of Parliament allowed for this 7th cycle to begin. So that's another important factor that, and we hopefully enough time would be allowed to elapse to facilitate this process. Maybe we may not be able to complete the 7th cycle, but every day, I presume, there are new persons who are able to be placed on the list, and it enhances our democratic process.
If I can take you guys back a little bit, coming back to November 10th, the impression was and the conclusion was that the opposition had Parliament convened that day, would have moved the no confidence motion, and clearly Parliament probably would have been dissolved. So it means that the opposition wants, they have indicated then that they want elections. Now that the president have made the announcement that he made 2 days ago or so, clearly he wasn't ambiguous. He was definitive in what he was saying. But then it was dismissed by the opposition as shooting breeze, and basically saying that the president is wasting time. I'm trying to get a sense of what's going on there.
The fact of the matter is that the president has indicated to the nation the intention to go to the elections and go to the elections very shortly. You cannot name a date, perhaps that is what they wanted to hear, without discussing with GCOM, without ensuring, as the AG was pointing out, that people are enfranchised, people are allowed to go and given the opportunity to vote. When the previous set of registration ended, by that time, let us assume that we would have had elections by February of next year, if assuming November that vote had taken place. A number of people, thousands of people, would not have been allowed to vote. They would have been disenfranchised. You cannot talk about democracy and free and fair elections and disenfranchise people. You have to give them an opportunity. You have to put them on roll because they would have attained the age of 18. And by not naming the date, would give time for the president to discuss with the Elections Commission and give the Elections Commission an opportunity to ensure that they address the issue of getting people on the voters list, sanitize the voters list, and then he will decide on the date.
But was he bound to name a date in the context that,
No.
in this
The
context?
naming of a date for elections is always a prerogative of the executive. In this instance, the president himself. He is not obliged to satisfy the demands of anyone when he exercises that constitutional power of naming a date for elections. The president is not a puppet of the opposition. They want an election date to be announced and therefore he must. That is the kind of foolishness that informed their criticism of the president's refusal to assent to their bills. They believe that they can pass a bill that is violative of the Constitution, is inconsistent with government's policy, and ram it down the throat of the president, and the president must, like a rubber stamp, give his assent. Parliament is made up of the president and the National Assembly. Unless there is a meeting of the minds, of both minds, on any issue, then it will not fly.
So the bottom
And
line
each
is
one has their respective powers to
so
exercise.
so the bottom line is based on the announcement. Then he has said that there will be
He has
elections
committed
to-
his government to early elections. He said that he will allow this Christmas season to pass, and then in January he will make another announcement in relation to, with greater specificity. Presumably then a date will be fixed. What is wrong with that? Well, what is wrong with the president saying, I'm committing to elections, but I'm not going to tell you now? That is one of the benefits, one of the powers, one of the prerogatives that the president enjoys.
We saw a similar.
And he's not merely doing that because he has the leverage. He's doing that for all pragmatic purposes. And he has said clearly, after allowing the Christmas season to pass, I will discuss with GCOM, and then I will take steps to dissolve and take steps to have election. It's a commitment. It's a commitment, and it's not a joke.
we have
And
seen-
significantly, while that is going on, more and more people are given the opportunity to be put on the list. I cannot understand how political parties can be opposed to citizens being placed on the list and therefore qualifying to vote at the elections. When the seventh cycle of registration began, APNU issued a statement criticizing the GCOM for embarking on this process. I don't know what is the AFC's position, but I don't. It is inconceivable in this era of democracy and the ethos of democracy that permeate the world today, that a political party would take a position that seemed to suggest that they are not in favor of as many people as possible having the power and the right and the Constitution.
But I want to go back a little
facility
to
to
say
vote.
on this prorogation and what the president afforded the opportunity to the opposition and what they have missed out. In every political party's agenda, they must have issues which they will want to highlight and bring to the fore. The president, by proroguing Parliament, allowed for that opportunity to bring them around the bargaining table for them to hear concerns which can be addressed with a reconvened Parliament or which can be addressed at a political level. And one of those issues, I believe, is to taking this country forward. And my biggest disappointment in the opposition is that they did not use the opportunity presented to them by the president to go and say, look, Mr. President, we want to talk. We've been clamoring all year long. We want us to discuss in a meaningful way the issue of a political solution in this country and take the dialogue to that level, to a next stage where there can be consensus building, starting from a new parliament, a reconvened parliament, starting how we work from here on, an agenda, because there's assuming the PPP will win the next election, but assuming again we win the majority and we form a government, are we going to continue in this vein? Why not use this opportunity that was presented by the president to say, here, were we to go into an election and these things happen, where do we go as a nation?
They
How,
said that.
how
Sorry.
do we amend our constitution to facilitate certain changes?
The-
And I think there were big opportunities for the entire opposition.
And it was lost.
If they were serious about nation building, they've lost it.
All right, the opposition said no dialogue unless Parliament would have been reconvened, right? Would have dialogue really been possible? Would it have really been possible had the President reconvened the Parliament? Based on what the opposition is saying?
The opposition has deliberately refused to say publicly in their call for a resumption of the sittings of Parliament that they will remove the no confidence motion from the agenda. So why are we going to Parliament? So that to facilitate them to pass their no confidence motion? What, are we stupid? But significantly, they have created such a furore in relation to local government elections. They have gone to the international community. They have gotten Starbrook News to run a daily headline on the front page. They have gone into the communities. They had the whole country hyped about the importance of local government elections and the importance of local democracy to our democratic and developmental process. The president is saying, yes, I'm going to hold local government elections. But I cannot hold it if you have a no confidence motion, because that will take us to general elections. We are going to go to general elections when the time is due. But let us now go to local government elections. This is what you are clamoring for.
I know you
At
cannot
least
speak.
the APNU and the APNU has been unable to disengage themselves from the tentacles of the AFC that is gung-ho, to use Gopal's word, to move this no confidence motion.
I want to ask you this. I know you cannot speak for the opposition, but given your politicians, given what you've just said in the context, why then would any politician not want to take any opportunity to discuss issues that will impact positively on the people that they were elected by?
But this opposition, this joint opposition, over the last 3 years, have consistently showed a marked disregard for anything in the National Assembly that is for the benefit of the Guyanese people. Not once have we heard them say that we should increase budgetary allocations. They have consistently caused us to reduce the budget, thereby allowing the government to spend less for the Guyanese. One would have expected that they would have used their political influence in the National Assembly to get the government to spend more. They have done exactly the opposite. They have rejected the anti-money laundering bill that is so important to the development of the financial welfare of this country. They have rejected the Hamaila Falls project. The hydropower is so necessary, so an important prerequisite for national development. They have rejected that. The airport of a country, a modern airport, is not a luxury. It is an economic unit. All countries in the world, they are moving that. Go to the Caribbean. All the countries, as small as they are, they have airports that can accommodate large aircrafts. They have hotels around those airports because it attracts business to a country. It brings revenue to a country. It's not a luxury. They have rejected that. So they have consistently, over the last 3 years, taken positions that are inimical to the Guyanese people. All they are concerned with is a particular outcome. That is, what is the way that they can get political power.
But wouldn't this be at the expense of the Guyanese people?
It is not only at the expense of the Guyanese people, but it tells the Guyanese people the true mindset. It sends a message, the mindset of these individuals. Were these people, given their behavior in the last 3 years, were they to secure political power in this country? God help those who oppose them. And it gives the mindset of real dictatorial behavior. And I'm telling you this, nothing patriotic has been shown. They should have given the Guyanese hope that they were a government in waiting. do things that will help Guyanese people. The power base, the rational decisions, the arrogance, the type of threatening behavior. Lock up who? They will lock up people, they will fry people. Some people said they will kill people. It can't be. It can't be from sane politicians.
Can I interject here? Have you ever heard them say anything that tend to suggest that they have an alternative plan of development for this country? So they reject airports, so that they don't want an airport. What do they want? They don't want a Marriott hotel, so they reject modern hotels. They don't want roads because they reject the Parika Road the other day. They don't want that. They don't want a proper hospital. They reject that. They don't want Amerindian development. They cut that out of the budget. So what is it that they want? The Guyanese people should sit down over the last 3 years and analyze what they have said. Have they ever articulated an economic plan? All right, you're rejecting the government's plan, but what is yours? All they speak about is corruption, who thieved this, who thieved that, some scandal, that is all that they speak about. That don't develop a country, unfortunately.
But given what Dr. Gopaul was saying just now and the kind of rhetoric that we hear coming out almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, jail this one and jail that one.
Shouldn't Guyanese be concerned about this?
I think Guyanese are concerned. Look at what. Let me just make this point quickly.
I have been walking around this country. Just now, I finished talking to 300 plus graduates in Region 5. Last week in Region 3, another 300. And in Linden, we've spoken to a set, in Bartica, another set, and we'll be going through the country. And when you speak to these young colleagues, they are so disappointed in the type of squabbling that has taken place in the last parliament. They have never seen anything like that. Those leaders have not set example for these young people to follow. And that disappointment is manifest throughout this country. I have no doubt. In fact, I believe with the behavior, when they cut the votes, we should have had election longer than now. And they would have seen the response of the people. In fact, what they have done by their actions will bring the fruits for them. And it won't be sweet fruits, it will be bitter. It will be really, really bitter. The results will be different. The PPP is going to go back to that election and it's going to retain its majority and might even win with a larger margin ever.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to say, just take, for example, you have the budget cut, for example. The Chief Justice has ruled. They have appealed. So, and they participated in the case. One would presume that they would have read and understood the judgment. And they repeatedly continue to cut the budget. We restored the budget that they have cut. We restored it in 2012. We restored it in 2013. And they approved the restoration. In 2014, when we did the same thing, they cut the budget and we restored it, Mr. Ramjattan went to report to the police that Ashley Singh has allegedly stolen 4.5 billion. Well, I have said to him then, and I'm saying to him now, just identify somebody. If you steal $100, there is an offense that you have committed in the laws of Guyana. So if a police is to charge you, they go to the Criminal Law Offences Act and they charge you that you have acted contrary to some section of the law. All he needs to do is to hold up to the country the section of the law that Dr. Ashley Singh has violated. But that is the kind of conduct that these politicians, who are supposed to be leading by example, are engaging in, rather than sit down and craft a policy of how to attract investment to our country. What are their views on that? How are they going to get jobs for you? How are they going to create jobs for our young people? You ever hear them talk about that?
All right, let me pose this question.
And Dr. Singh's action was backed by, as Anil's pointed out, by a Chief Justice ruling, a decision which has not been overturned. But the moment he did that, they sought to bring the man to the privilege committee. They want to discipline him.
Yeah, there's another thing.
When you act in conformity with the law
Sorry.
or a ruling of a judge, they're going to bring disciplinary thing. This parliament
All right, let me pose this question.
might
The
be
opposition have
presided over
dubbed,
somebody called Almighty God.
they have dubbed the prorogation of Parliament as an act of dictatorship. And similarly, recently, they've also dubbed the announcement of salary increases as an act of a dictatorship. Explain what you think would make the opposition label a constitutional right by the president and giving public servants more money an act of dictatorship.
I will ask Dr. Gopal to deal with the public servant salary, since that is his domain. But let me speak on the constitutional thing. Look, when they moved the no confidence motion, that was intended to bring down a government. That was intended to curtail a 5-year term government to 3 years. Isn't that? Can I not argue that that is a dictatorial action? An anti-democratic move, but a constitution provides for it. Now, fast forward a little, the president has a power to issue a proclamation and prorogue a parliament. The very constitution that gives them that power to move the no confidence motion confers this power on the president. That very constitution doesn't limit the president to specific grounds upon which he can prorogue. In other words, he can prorogue for any given reason. Prorogation, the power of prorogation has invariably been used in Commonwealth countries where it resides in their constitution to avoid a no confidence motion, specifically to avoid a no confidence motion being brought against the government. It is the preemptive measure that is used predominantly in a constitution where it resides. How, when the president exercised, when they want to move a no confidence motion, it is not undemocratic. But when the president exercises this prorogation power, it is anti-democratic. And I heard the argument advanced that the framers of the Constitution did not intend for the power of prorogation to be used in this manner. But I don't know how they're coming to that conclusion. So the framers of the Constitution intended that a no confidence motion can be brought and bring down a government, and the framers of the Constitution, although they gave the president a power of prorogation, expects him not to exercise it, but to be thrown out of office? Is that what the framers of the Constitution intended? That is an absurdity.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Gopal here in terms of
the mechanism of checks and balances.
But in terms of the public servants getting an increase, that in some way has been deemed as an act of dictatorship by the president when he announced a 5 and 8% increase.
Well, what would a government do if at the end of the year, in the month of December, an agreement has not been arrived at between the unions and the government agency that is negotiating? Workers generally look out for some retroactivity, look out for some wage announcement, and the government thought it was a wise thing to do, not only wise, but something which the workers were looking forward to, make the announcement of a payout based on affordability. Now, the president has given a commitment to the main union in the public service during the course of this year that he would like to see collective bargaining be meaningful, would like to see the outcome be one of objectivity and where parties express and show reasonableness. To date, that has not happened, and we have been unable to get an agreement, which is unfortunate. One would have thought that as we mature and as we develop over a period of time, we would be able to find consensus, we'll be able to negotiate agreements and have that, but we didn't have that. But the fact remains that we were not going to send people home at Christmas time without an increase. The country can afford an increase, the president gave it. Better yet, the president, the government paid not a 5%, but 8% for those in a vulnerable grouping. Those earning less than $50,000 got an 8% award. Above that, they got a 5% award. Consistently over the years, since 1992, the government has protected real wages in a real sense. In a real sense. We have paid wages way above inflation, and so while we still believe much more can be done, we have been able as a government to protect every single worker, protect them by the laws of this country, employment laws.
In 15 seconds.
Every worker is protected under this PPPC government.
In 15
by
seconds.
our enacting one, a national minimum wage and national working hours.
All right, our time is almost up, but in 15 seconds, I want you to respond to the statement that the president announcing this increase has been deemed in some way by the opposition as an act of a dictatorship. I'm trying to wonder, as a Guyanese, how by getting more money.
Well, I was answering it to say clearly, it could not be the act of a dictator if you break down. Provisions in the ILO exist for government to impose wage increases if talks break down. In times of economic crisis, again, we're not a flourishing economy where we had oil dollar, petrol dollar, or we're rolling in gold.
But the truth of the matter is, in the Caribbean region, for example, the IMF, Jamaica has gone to the IMF to pay salaries. Not an increase in salaries, to pay salaries to public servants. The IMF, Barbados went to the IMF, and the IMF recommended that 3,000 public servants in Barbados be dismissed. In the OECS countries, they are going, St. Kitts and so on, they have approached lending institutions to get funding to pay salaries, not to pay increase in salaries, to pay existing salaries. We in Guyana, every single year, with or without a union, we have been increasing public servants' salaries and increasing social benefits right across the country. By what canon of logic can that be deemed dictatorial? How does dictatorial come into the whole equation?
And mind you, we have had to struggle. We have had to struggle for over 10 years in the courts of this country under the PNC administration to restore increments to workers which were taken away in 1979. We faced wage freeze and lack of collective bargaining for several years during the course of the period 79 to 84. We face astronomical increase in cost of living, and so when they introduced ERP, it was deemed empty rice pot.
I wish we had more time, gentlemen, but I want to give you at least 30 to 40 seconds each to talk about, given all that you would have said here in the program, the way forward. That's the name of our program, or the topic, the way forward, given all that was said. Let me start with you.
I will say the way forward is what I've been telling Guyanese throughout as I meet with them. Come election time, learn from the mistakes which we have made, ensure that we do not have a position where an opposition can railroad a government in its function and deny the country, the people's country, the wealth which they're entitled to and the development path which they're entitled. Vote solidly this time.
Attorney General?
The way forward is, obviously, politically, we are moving in the directions of an elections, and that is going to be sooner than later. The specificity of information in relation to that will come in January. I would urge Guyanese to take advantage of the 7th cycle of registration. Make sure that many persons as possible are put on the list. The transfers that have to be done are done. The persons who need source documents, that the process is expedited for them to get that so that they are qualified to vote. That's the first thing. Then secondly, to each Guyanese to sit down and analyze, look at the 3 political parties. Analyze what has been done in this country. Let us take the last 20 years and then the last 3 years. See where we have moved as a country from where we were to where we are now. Look at the role of the opposition in this developmental process. Have they contributed to development, or have they acted in a manner that is inimical to development? And look at the time where they had the most influence that they have ever had, which would have been from 2011 November to now. And look at what they have done for the people of this country. If any person has been positively affected by any actions by the opposition over the last 3 years as they wield a majority in the parliament, I will be surprised.
Right.
The people do not have to look very far. Just look at their actions and look at their utterances. Have they laid out a plan of how they will develop this country on any given issue? Any given issue. What is their alternative to what they are criticizing the government for? And you will see that there is no alternative. At least they have not voiced one.
All right, on that note, I have to thank you very much for participating and sparing time from your busy schedule. You're watching Political Scope. My guests were the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Anil Nandlall, and Minister of Labor, the Honorable Dr. Nanda Gopaul. Thank you very much again. Niyasuban saying so long until next time.
Thank you.